Hi, my name is Rachel, and before I begin, I want to ask you something real quick. Has your own family ever laughed at your dreams? Have they ever looked at you like you weren't good enough, just because you didn't have a big title or a shiny car or a so-called real job? I know that pain. I've felt that silence at dinner when no one asks what you do because they already decided you're a disappointment. If that's ever happened to you, I want you to leave a comment. Tell me where you're from and if someone ever made you feel like you didn't matter. I read all of them and I promise you're not alone in this. Because what I'm about to share, well, it still makes me pause when I think about it. I didn't plan revenge. I didn't scream or break anything. I just kept going, kept building, kept proving myself in silence. Until the day came. It was my brother's engagement dinner. I was sitting quietly in the corner like always. My parents hadn't even told half the guests I was their daughter. I didn't mind anymore. I was used to fading into the background. But then something happened. My brother's fiancée looked at me. She squinted, leaned closer and whispered in disbelief. "Wait, you're Rachel Carter? You're the one who bought the mansion." And suddenly the room froze. Forks stopped moving. Mouths hung open. Even my father couldn't say a word. Because in that moment, that one strange, still, powerful moment, my entire family realized something. They had spent years mocking the wrong person. I was always the embarrassment of the family. I didn't live in a fancy neighborhood. I didn't drive anything worth noticing. I rented a small 2-bedroom apartment with old kitchen tiles and a leaky faucet that I learned to fix myself. My name's Rachel Carter and I run a small online handmade craft store. I make customized wall hangings, memory quilts and rustic home decor, all from my kitchen table. Now, to someone who knows the value of honest work, that might sound just fine. But to my family, it was laughable. My parents came from money, not old money, but we made it and now we want everyone to know it kind of wealth. Every conversation in our home growing up revolved around who had just bought what, who was driving what, who vacationed where. If you didn't show up with something flashy, you might as well have not shown up at all. Then there was my younger brother Jake. Oh, Jake could do no wrong. He worked at a big-name bank downtown, wore suits even on weekends and spoke in polished sentences that made my mom beam with pride. He was the golden boy and he knew it. When he got engaged to Lisa, the whole family went wild. She was beautiful, smart and well-connected. The type of woman who looked like she belonged in a glossy magazine. The engagement made front-page news on my mom's Facebook. She must have posted the same photo 10 times. Meanwhile, I barely existed in the family group chat. At events, I was never properly introduced. It was always, "Oh, that's just Rachel." Sometimes people didn't even know I was Jake's sister until halfway through the evening. I'll never forget one Thanksgiving dinner. The whole extended family was there. Cousins from out of town, my parents' business friends, even Lisa's parents. The dining room looked like a magazine spread. Polished silverware, tall wine glasses, 3 different kinds of stuffing. I had brought one of my handmade centerpieces as a gift. It had autumn leaves, tiny hand-stitched initials, and even a little ribbon with our last name embroidered in gold. I placed it quietly on the table and stepped back, just hoping someone would notice. My mother looked at it once, wrinkled her nose and pushed it aside to make space for a flower vase Lisa brought. She didn't say a word to me. Later that evening, as everyone raised a toast to Jake's latest promotion, my mother turned to one of Lisa's relatives and said, "At least Jake turned out successful. God knows we tried our best with Rachel, but..." She didn't even finish the sentence. She just gave that tight smile, the one she saves for things that disappoint her. I felt it in my chest. That familiar twist. I wasn't surprised anymore. Just tired. I didn't talk back. I didn't roll my eyes or storm out. I just smiled like I always do, took a sip of wine, and looked around at the glittering room full of people who thought I was a joke. And then I did what I always do. I went home, took off the shoes that hurt my feet, tied my hair back and got back to work. Orders were piling up for the holiday season. I had emails to answer, shipments to pack and 3 memory blankets to finish. I sewed until 2 in the morning. They laughed at my little internet hobby. But that little hobby had started bringing in enough to cover all my bills. And then some. What they didn't know, what they never cared to ask, was that my tiny business had been growing slowly but surely for years. I had loyal customers from across the country, a warehouse partnership ready to launch, and just a few months earlier, I had signed papers on a company name that would change everything. But I kept it quiet. Because I wasn't doing it for their approval anymore. I was doing it for myself. Still, I'd be lying if I said I didn't want them to know one day. Not through me screaming it. Not through a fight. But through one single quiet moment. And that moment was coming sooner than I ever expected. It started during the early days of the pandemic. People were stuck at home looking to make their spaces feel warmer, more comforting. And for some reason my little handmade craft struck a nerve. Orders started pouring in. At first, it overwhelmed me. I was still working from my cramped kitchen table, wrapping things in brown paper, handwriting every thank you note. But then I got smart. I built a website. Clean, simple, easy to use. I optimized my listings, offered personalization, and most importantly, I listened to my customers. I began selling not just handmade decor, but memory quilts made from old clothes, wedding keepsakes, custom home signs. Word spread. A few influencers ordered, and suddenly my little shop was being tagged in posts from all over the world. I couldn't keep up alone anymore. I hired 2 part-time helpers. Then, as demand kept growing, I partnered with a local fulfillment center. It meant I could still create the designs, but they'd handle shipping and packaging at scale. The orders tripled after that. By the end of the year, I wasn't just covering my rent. I had savings. Real savings. And I did something I never imagined I'd do. I started investing. Carefully. Quietly. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friend at the time. I bought a few small properties, flipped one, held another. All of it was done under my business's name, legally clean and separate from me as a person. One afternoon, my lawyer, an older man named Harold with kind eyes and a voice that always sounded like he was about to reveal a secret, called me. "Rachel," he said, "you might want to see this listing. A mansion in the suburbs. Quiet neighborhood. Owners moving overseas. Price is ridiculously low for what it is. And best of all, no public records tie it to your personal name." I almost laughed. Me? Buying a mansion? But curiosity got the better of me. I drove out to see it. It was beautiful. Big iron gates, a circular driveway, 5 bedrooms, sunlit kitchen, even a greenhouse in the back. Everything my parents ever bragged about having, but with more heart. You could tell the house had been loved. Not just decorated for show. And I bought it. Just like that. I wired the money from my company account. Harold took care of the paperwork. The name on the deed was my company's, not mine. I didn't move in. Not yet. I had plans. Quiet ones. And I never told my family. They never asked. That's the thing, you'd think they'd be curious. They still treated me like I was selling trinkets at a flea market. Never once did they ask, "Hey Rachel, how's your business going?" Not seriously. At best, they'd make comments like, "Still doing your little crafts thing?" Or, "Hope it's bringing in enough for groceries." I learned to smile through it. To sip my coffee while they talked about Jake's quarterly bonus or Lisa's boutique opening. I learned to keep my wins to myself. I'd show up at family gatherings in the same old cardigan I'd worn the year before. Drive the same car. Bring something simple like a pie, homemade but nothing flashy. And they thought that meant I hadn't changed. But behind the scenes, I had a growing team. A private accountant. A real estate portfolio. A brand deal in the works with a major retailer. My handmade business, the one they mocked, had crossed 7 figures. But I didn't need to announce it. Because I was playing a longer game. The kind where the reveal isn't loud. It's unforgettable. And it was coming. The invitation came in a cream-colored envelope with golden trim. Just like everything Jake and Lisa did. Over the top. Elegant. Loud. My brother's engagement party was going to be held at a private mansion in the suburbs. Black tie optional. Catered dinner. Wine pairings. Custom floral arrangements. I wasn't really invited because they wanted me there. It felt more like an obligation. A box they had to check so no one could say, "Wait, where's Jake's sister?" So I decided to go. I pulled out my one good dress, the same one I'd worn to Lisa's birthday party 2 years ago. A party where she barely acknowledged my presence. I didn't mind. In fact, I preferred being invisible. It gave me space to observe. To understand. When I arrived at the address on the invite, my heart stopped. The driveway was familiar. So were the tall gates, the cobblestone path, the grand entry door framed with carved wooden vines. I froze. Oh, this couldn't be. I parked across the street and stared. Guests were already walking in. Men in suits, women in floor-length dresses. Valets waved cars forward. Laughter echoed from the garden. I walked slowly toward the entrance, my heels clicking on stone I'd once walked barefoot across during a quiet sunrise tour with my lawyer. This was my house. My house. The one I bought in silence through my business, registered under a shell company with no connection to my personal name. A secret I'd guarded for over a year. And now it was decked out in white roses and string lights. Champagne glasses were clinking inside. The moment I stepped into the foyer, I knew every inch. The marble counters I'd chosen during renovation, the tall glass staircases that I fell in love with on first sight, the open kitchen with the warm walnut finish, all of it. I smiled. Lisa saw me first. She was holding a champagne flute, surrounded by a circle of women. Her dress sparkled like it had been stitched with starlight. She turned, spotted me, and her expression shifted. A quick flicker of irritation, then a forced smile. "Rachel," she said, moving toward me, her heels barely making a sound on my floors. "You made it." "I did," I replied softly. She leaned in for a quick air kiss, the kind where cheeks don't touch. Then she pulled back and gave me a long look up and down before returning to her group. The party moved around me like I wasn't there. Everyone was complimenting the house. "This marble, is it imported? Did you see the garden fountain? The natural light in here is insane. Jake's done well for himself." I wandered slowly through each room. My rooms. I touched the kitchen island where I once signed the final purchase documents. I looked out the back doors toward the greenhouse where I planned to grow herbs. My herbs. Then I overheard Lisa giggling loud enough for a small audience. "Jake surprised me with this place," she said. "Can you believe it? He just handed me the keys one day and said, 'It's all yours, baby.'" People gasped, clapped, laughed. "He said he wanted me to feel like a queen," she added. "And I do. It's mine now." My breath caught in my throat. I didn't flinch. I didn't even raise an eyebrow. Instead, I took a long sip of water and let the burn of that lie settle inside me. Jake, my brother, claiming he bought it. As a surprise gift, no less. He didn't even know he was standing inside a house I paid for. Every brick, every fixture. He didn't know the paperwork was signed under my business name. He didn't know that his grand romantic gesture was built on something I created in silence. I wanted to laugh. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I made my way toward the dining room. The caterers were setting up tiny plates of smoked salmon and cream cheese on cucumber rounds. Classical music played softly. I could hear my mother's voice behind me. "She's lucky," Mom said. "Lisa, I mean. Not everyone gets to marry someone like Jake. He's always been so ambitious. Responsible. Not like Rachel," came another voice. "An aunt maybe." My mother sighed. "Rachel's doing her little internet thing still, I think. Something with crafts? She's always been a bit offbeat." I clenched my jaw. "Anyway," my mother continued, "Lisa fits into our family beautifully. Plus style. And now this house. What a gift." I stayed still. Quiet. Because this wasn't the moment. I looked around one more time and reminded myself. I didn't need them to validate me. Not anymore. But that didn't mean I wouldn't correct them. Eventually. For now I just smiled. Stepped into the garden. Let the night continue, watched the charade unfold and waited for the perfect moment. As it was coming. The dinner was everything you'd expect from a family like mine. Crystal glasses, white linens, silver cutlery so polished you could see your reflection. Everyone was gathered around the long oak table, a table I had picked out by the way, laughing, sipping, pretending like life was perfect. I sat near the end of the table like always. Out of the spotlight. Just the sister with a crafting hobby, as my mother liked to say. Jake and Lisa were seated right at the center, basking in everyone's attention. She kept flashing her ring and he kept making small speeches about love and commitment. You know, the kind of speeches that sound like they were pulled straight from a Hallmark movie. Guests clapped politely, some dabbed at their eyes, and Lisa leaned her head on Jake's shoulder like they were royalty. I stayed quiet, nodding when appropriate, eating slowly. I didn't even mind the fact that no one really spoke to me. I was waiting. Not out of pettiness. No, this was about truth. And the truth always shows up. Eventually. About halfway through dinner, when the servers had just brought out the roast chicken and truffle mashed potatoes, there was a knock at the door. It was firm. Intentional. One of the staff went to check. I watched from my seat, still quietly chewing my food. Then the door opened and in walked a woman in a black blazer, holding a slim brown folder. It was my real estate agent. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, glancing around the room with an apologetic smile. "But I was told this was the right time to drop off the final document. Just a signature needed from the legal owner." She scanned the table, paused for a second, and then walked directly toward me. "Rachel," she said warmly, "just one quick signature and we're all done." She placed the folder right in front of my plate and handed me a pen. I could feel it, the shift in the room. Like all the oxygen had been sucked out in an instant. Lisa's voice cut through the silence. Why are you giving that to her?" My agent blinked, then looked genuinely confused. "Because she owns this property. Rachel is the legal owner." Dead. Silence. You could have heard a spoon drop. I looked around slowly. Every face was turned to me, confused, stunned, some already pale with realization. Lisa's hand was still frozen in mid-air, her fork dangling between her fingers. Her mouth opened slightly. "You're joking," she said. "She's the one who bought our mansion?" The agent, still unaware of the tension she'd just unleashed, simply nodded. "Yes. Miss Rachel finalized the purchase through her LLC. We've just been waiting on one last signature." I could feel my heart pounding, but I kept my face calm. "Cool." I signed the paper slowly, deliberately, then looked up, and locked eyes with Lisa. And I smiled. "Well," I said quietly, "I guess my little online hobby paid off." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Jake's mouth was hanging open. Literally open. He looked like someone had just hit him with a frying pan. Our father dropped his fork with a loud clatter. It bounced off the plate and hit the table. His eyes were wide, confused, like he was doing math in his head that didn't make sense. Oh, my mother. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Pale, rigid, blinking way too fast. Her lips were parted, but no sound came out. The entire table, people who had spent the whole night laughing, celebrating, pretending, suddenly didn't know what to say. And I just sat there, calm as the eye of a storm. "I'm sorry," Lisa finally said, blinking. "You bought this? Like, you actually own this place?" I nodded. "I do." "But how?" she asked, almost breathless. "You sell, like, little craft things online, right?" "Handmade home decor," I corrected her gently. "During COVID, business went global. I opened a fulfillment warehouse. Then I invested in real estate. Quietly. "But you never said anything," Jake whispered. "You never asked," I replied. I wasn't trying to rub it in. I wasn't trying to humiliate them. But the truth needed to land exactly where it hurt. Not to crush them, but to finally wake them. Lisa stood up abruptly, her chair screeching back. "So, all that time I thought you bought me this place, Jake. It was hers? You didn't even know." Jake said nothing. His face was bright red, then pale, then red again. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Mom finally found her voice. "You never told us about any of this. Why would you keep it from your family?" I looked at her, holding her gaze. "Because you made it clear I was a disappointment. You all did." "I never," she began, but I gently cut her off. "Do you remember Thanksgiving? The one where you raised a toast and said, 'At least Jake turned out successful'?" I remember. Every word. My father sat back slowly, silent. I continued. "I worked hard. I failed. I tried again. And while you laughed at my little hobby, I built something real. Something big. And I didn't tell you because I wanted to know if you'd ever value me for who I am, not what I earn." The room stayed quiet. Finally, someone at the end of the table let out a slow whistle. It was Uncle Marvin, who rarely said anything but always noticed everything. "Damn," he said. "Guess the quiet ones really do surprise you." A few awkward laughs followed. Nervous. Uncomfortable. Lisa excused herself to the bathroom, clearly shaken. Jake stayed frozen, like his world had tilted off its axis. I folded the signed paper back into the folder and handed it to my agent. She smiled awkwardly and walked out, still unaware of the emotional earthquake she had caused. I took one last bite of my dinner and then stood up slowly. "I think I'm going to call it a night," I said softly. "Thank you all for the lovely evening." And then I walked out, not with arrogance, not with revenge in my heart, but with quiet dignity. Because nothing was louder than the silence they sat in after I left. I left the party quietly that night without making a scene or raising my voice. No shouting, no tears, no grand exit. Just a calm walk out the front door, stepping into the cool night air, feeling the weight of years lift off my shoulders. The silence behind me was louder than any argument I could have started. Sometimes dignity speaks louder than anger. The next morning my phone rang. It was Jake. I didn't answer right away. When I finally did, his voice was uncertain, almost lost. Rachel, about last night. I don't really know what to say. It wasn't an apology. Not really. It was confusion. A mix of hurt, pride, and shock. Like he was trying to process a truth that didn't fit into his perfect little world. He didn't say he was sorry for doubting me all those years. He didn't say he was proud. He didn't even ask how I managed to do it. He just sounded confused, like everything he believed about me had been turned upside down. I listened quietly. When he finished, I said softly, "Jake, I don't need your apologies. Or anyone else's. I built something on my own. Something real. And that's more valuable than any fake family pride or hollow words." There was a pause on the line, then he hung up. I sat there for a moment, phone still in my hand, and smiled. I realized something important. They never really cared about my success. What bothered them was that they were wrong. That I was right all along. And that truth stung their pride more than anything. But I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need their approval to know my worth. For years I let their judgments shape how I saw myself. I let their laughter silence my dreams. But now I was free. I was enough. And that was the real victory. Sometimes, your biggest win isn't about proving others wrong or forcing them to see your worth. Sometimes it's about realizing you never needed their approval to begin with. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The future felt wide open and full of possibility. Because finally, I wasn't just the embarrassment of the family. I was Rachel, a woman who dared to dream, work hard, and win on her own terms. And nothing could take that away from me. If this story reminded you of your own family struggles, your own battles, or maybe even your quiet success that nobody saw coming, I want to hear from you. Please leave a comment down below and tell me where you're from. Have you ever been underestimated by the people closest to you? Maybe your family doubted your dreams or judged you for the path you chose. Maybe they laughed quietly behind your back or openly told you that you wouldn't make it. You're not alone. I read every comment because your story matters. We all have faced those moments when it felt like the world was against us, especially from the people we expected to support us the most. But here's the thing. Those quiet moments, those small steps we take when no one is watching, sometimes lead to the biggest wins. So if you've ever been told you were too small, too late, or not good enough, remember this. Sometimes the quiet ones are the ones who own the mansion. Sometimes, the people you least expect are quietly building their own empire while the world waits for them to fail. Let's talk about those moments today. Share your experiences in the comments, because your story might inspire someone else who needs to hear it. We're in this together. A community of fighters, dreamers, and silent victors. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gives you the courage to keep going, to keep working hard, and to believe in yourself no matter what anyone says. Remember, you don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes success speaks the loudest when it's quiet. I can't wait to read your stories. So please comment below and let's connect.